Aloha, namaste. This is Radha Home, also known as Alexis Cox, bringing you your full moon update for Wednesday, June 27th, here just a couple days away. The full moon is going to be in sidereal Sagittarius, where we go out into the world and discover our beliefs and ideals, feel inspired, and want to meet with other cultures and other reflections of that inspiration and ideals, and sometimes form really solid opinions or beliefs ourselves, and can at times be dogmatic. We can at times stand up on a pulpit and sort of preach to others in this place. So that's where we need to be concerned, or where we need to watch out in Sagittarius, is when we're sort of placing our ideals on other people, putting our belief systems on others instead of allowing them to have their own, and also using their experiences or their belief systems as a way to check in with our own, as opposed to judging theirs as wrong and preaching our own. So this is a distinction that needs to occur in this area of our life, and often doesn't. The full moon is in the nakshatra, the specific star called Mula. Mula is the beginning of Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is the beginning of the universal section of the zodiac. So it's where we're taking that energy of one-to-one with others and moving it into a more universal realm. So with Mula, we need to uproot. Mula means root in Sanskrit. We need to uproot that which was not working from the previous section and plant something new. The goddess of this nakshatra is called Nariti, and she is very destructive and wild and calamitous. And there's a freedom there. There's a freedom in this destruction because it's so wild and it just destroys everything in its path. But it's also leaving us with empty holes. It's leaving us with a landscape that's blank with plenty to plant on it, but also it's no longer pretty. It's no longer has all the nice things that we've built on it. It's just barren and full of scars from the destruction. So we have to look at that as an empty palette that we can actually make something beautiful on, as opposed to just a destructive field that there's nothing left of and we can't work with anymore. It requires us to embrace destruction. This particular full moon is going to be in very close degrees to the planet Saturn, very close. Saturn retrograde right on this full moon. So we see that our destruction, our destructive energy is maybe more halted, more fear-based, more hesitant than it might be otherwise, where we feel this pressure on us from Saturn of the amount of time we have. We only have so much time and we need to get these things done and all of this. And so we might not be as full on in our destruction, which might not serve us in the long run, because at the end of the day, the whole point of Mula is to take it all up from the roots. If you sort of just do a little bit so that you can quickly build back on it because you're fearful, that's not going to take care of the bigger issue, and you're going to end up building on a faulty foundation yet again, which is basically what Mula is trying to undo. We see Saturn's retrograde. Of course, it's been retrograde for several months, so we've been feeling this sort of confusion and delay with our commitments and what we're committed to, this questioning. And we also see that Jupiter, the ruler of this full moon, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, is also retrograde and has been retrograde. So there's a lot of questioning about what we believe, and is this true, and is this teaching good, and is that teaching good, and not really being super confident, really, in our beliefs and ideals and in our commitments. And so that retrograde motion sort of stalls us, and we have added to that Mars going retrograde tomorrow, June 26th. We see our planet of action, courage, and discipline beginning its retrograde motion, which we're already feeling now. So you can see that the forward motion we've had while Mars has been in Capricorn, really marching in and sort of forcing us to deal with things we didn't want to look at or we didn't want to deal with, is slowing down. And what happens when Mars energy is not funneled properly, as it generally is in Capricorn, into physical activity, we get angry. So already you can see anger starting to come up. I've noticed it just driving or engaging with others, but also in myself. Just that anger that comes from a lack of action or a lack of ability to act in the world, where things are sort of stopping up and backing up and starting to slow down, and you really want forward action because Mars in Capricorn wants to get stuff done. So this is a frustration for all of us, and Mars is starting to take this motion and move backwards. And we're going to see that, if you saw my report last month, where Mars and Ketu, the South Node, came together in early June, we saw that sort of explosive energy. Well, Mars is actually going to be marching back over the South Node in the retrograde action July 18th. And this time there will be that same sort of energy of explosiveness that Mars and Ketu bring, but with Mars retrograde. So you see there's a lot of suppression and a lot of halting. It's not as clean of action. It's gonna like come out in a more kind of spurts or erratic, as it's not being marched forward with the discipline and courage that Mars normally has. So that we'll see that in the world with humans and with our own anger and our own capacity to act, and then also in any kind of natural disasters that are coming up and things we see. And disasters, I'm not crazy about that word because it's just nature shifting itself. But where I live in Hawaii on the Big Island, we have the Kilauea volcano has been releasing her lava into the land, and the volcanoes, there's just volcanoes going off everywhere. I can't remember the number, but there's a lot of volcanoes that are exploding. And then of course there's all kinds of explosions other than volcanoes, and other ways that energy can come out. So again, without a clear, clean channel, you see it coming out in more erratic, spastic ways that are less fluid and not on a path as well, because it's not. That's a cat. I'm house sitting, and that's it. That cat has a little bit of a sound it makes. So we're going to see Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars all retrograde in this next couple weeks, and then come July 10th, Jupiter is going to start to move forward. So we're going to see a little bit more forward motion, at least, or a little bit more confidence with our beliefs and ideals. We might feel ourselves becoming inspired again, which is so important because so much of what we do comes from that inspiration. So at that point, we might find it easier to plant new things and to really, see a clear vision of where this is all going for us. Certainly better than at this exact moment. Right after Jupiter goes direct, we're going to have the new moon solar eclipse in Gemini and Cancer. The moon will be in Gemini, the moon sun, will be in Gemini, and the eclipse point, the node Rahu, the north node, will be in Cancer. So we see ourselves having a little bit of a reset there on our taking in of information and our emotional processing of that. And there's so much information out there now. Everyone's, got facts at their fingertips constantly. So we each have our own path with that we have to take in, our communication and our output of information, and then our input as well of information, and how we relate that to our emotional state. All of these things happen in a specific house for each one of us. Each one of us has a different rising sign, and we have all of our houses set up from that. So it's a different area of your life, but the energy is that of this sign. So the sign Gemini is going to be the same for all of us, but it will rule a different part of your life that will actually be coming up. And it can be dramatic. It can be very different, whether it's your house of partnerships or your house of career or your house of speech or whatnot. So it's going to make a difference, but we will all be dealing with our communication. And it's interesting because this full moon, we see that both Mercury and Venus are in Cancer, joined to that north node. We see sort of an obsession around our relationships with others and our communication with them. And Mercury is still early degrees, so it hasn't quite moved in with Rahu yet. Venus just passed over Rahu, so we sort of had the most intensity of that energy this past week. And Mercury will move into that, where we become sort of more obsessed with the communication part of it than the relationship itself. But both Mercury and Venus don't necessarily operate that well in Cancer, because Cancer is a sign of unconditional giving and unconditional love, like a mother to a child. And we find that when we are dealing in the realm of relationships, as Venus is and Mercury is also, we're giving with this idea that it sort of comes off unconditionally, but we don't really feel unconditional about it. We actually want something in return, and we want unconditional love in return. We want to give unconditional love and get unconditional love, but we're doing it in the wrong field. It's not meant to happen in relationships. It's meant to happen, again, with parents and children, and then of course with your relationship with divinity, whether that's through a teacher or a religious person, or whether that is through your direct connection to Source. But however that plays out, that's where we find our unconditional love, through gurus, through teachings, our teachers, and through spiritual leaders, and then through, of course, our direct connection to Source. And when you're children, that's your parents. But we don't do that with our love relationships, with our romantic relationships, or even our friends. And Mercury is where we're wanting to engage communication with our friends and our loved ones, and we're wanting them to understand us. And when it's in Cancer, our communication is very emotional, and we're almost controlling and not present with the details and the facts and the figures, and more telling the story as it felt rather than as it is, which is not healthy for communication. It does not promote good communication. So we see that energy around relationships is going to be a lot of what we're sort of uprooting in this Mula time, where we're like, wow, we're getting kind of caught up in this obsessive energy around relationships and specific people, and wanting them to feel this way and us wanting to feel this way, and that's not really working. In the sky, when you move into Sagittarius, you move from Scorpio, which is the water sign that kind of is the most controlling and the most emotionally crazy, and that's where the moon is right now as I film this, and it's a state of debilitation where we're just kind of like all over the place. So we see that controlling others and coming from that really emotion-driven place with others is not actually that healthy, and doesn't really work to serve our own purpose in this world, which is, of course, more than just relating to one other person. And it doesn't serve anything greater that we're trying to do in this world either. So that's what a lot of what we're going to be uprooting in this full moon. And I hope this is helpful. I hope you have a beautifully destructive full moon, and retrograde Mars, Jupiter, Saturn period. And I hope that inspiration and your ideals and beliefs come and really help guide you in the directions you want to go and what you really want to plant in this world. Not just from a desire-driven place, but from that place of you that's really connected to something higher and something greater. And I hope that for myself as well. Blessings, aloha, namaste.